So Stani, thanks for hopping on the Accelerate DeFi webcast. The core focus for this webcast is to really understand your mental models on how you built Aave and how you went through the journey, and then really learn more about how you're thinking about the future. So I want to start off with a quick question about your background. You have a unique background in crypto. You actually went to law school, and you witnessed the power of Bitcoin pretty early on. So what was like the aha moment in regards to like why you think this was the industry you wanted to build in? Oh, here.
Yeah, so yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, I used to do I used to develop way back ago applications, more like financial applications.
Mhm.
So I always had like some interest in finance. I really love the idea that that it's based quite a lot on mathematics and basically that it's like you can let the code to do the heavy lifting. What I liked about law is that it was a bit opposite. It's very opinionated in
Yeah.
sense of like there isn't like right and wrong, and there is different kinds of opinions, and based on those opinions, you have a consensus. And this was for me kind of like opposite and fascinating, and I wanted to learn more about it, and I went to study law. But I was always involved in tech, and I was always trying to read bunch of stuff like how to apply tech in whatever I was doing. And I ended up like finding like Ethereum. It was funny because I knew there was like Bitcoin around.
Mhm.
I kind of understood it and I cared about it, but I didn't care that much. When I saw that actually that what Ethereum had is the virtual machine, EVM. So you could actually deploy a piece of code and that can do almost anything there on chain. I was fascinated that actually it's basically immutable and you could create transactions. You don't need to trust people. You create non-custodial kind of like interactions, and that for me was very fascinating. And I started to think like what you could actually build. My first idea was somehow tied into what was I studying back then and practicing law and thinking like how I could implement. But I knew quickly like kind of like actually where we could have more utilization is basically in finance, like creating financial applications, because they didn't exist at all in DeFi. I mean, back then there wasn't any DeFi. There was one only thing, which was the Ether Delta that was existing then, and nobody used Ether Delta at all. I mean, in the beginning, it was completely like I remember buying some First Blood tokens and putting there. I waited 1 week to someone to grab them, and there was no liquidity at all. And when we saw like more and more the token generation events, then Ether Delta took off, and during that time we started to build 2016, and then 2017 we launched the ETHLand, our first kind of
Yep.
like project. What was interesting then, like there wasn't an ecosystem. So our product was very interesting. It provides usability, but there wasn't stable coins on Ethereum. So
Yeah.
like we were building something that is very useful, but we realized that actually what finance is all about is the ecosystem. So when people are able to trade with each other, borrow from here, return there, and trade some other place, then like you get the usability. And we learned that actually like to get this thing to get to the next level, you have to have the ecosystem, and
Mhm.
that is something that evolved over the time. And but that's how we got started. We just started the project, and it just went forward from that.
What you mentioned towards the end of the conversation was the ecosystem being vibrant in order for kind of the entire DeFi stack to work. What were some of the catalytic moments that kind of helped propel Aave in terms of user growth? Like, what were some of the key events that helped seeing like an uptick in kind of users coming onto Aave?
Yeah, I think we definitely had like few of these moments. I think during the ETHLand era, I would say it was more about stable coins because it
Okay.
allowed people to get yield on stable value. So that was a big value proposition.
Yeah.
And after that, when we came into the Aave era and we launched during this year, um, I would say like kind of like the ecosystem growth in per se, but also like mainly like most of the value that comes into Aave, like in terms of like locked value, uh, it comes from different projects. So we do have user interface that anyone can use.
Mhm.
The user experience is very seamless. It's very beautiful. There's that is what was our goal, to just create one example interface that everyone can copy and
Mhm.
create their own experiences. But mainly Aave is used as a kind of like baseline protocol of products that they're building. For example, there is a project called Pods Finance, and they're
Mhm.
using Aave in a way that they're storing their collateral in Aave and generating more yield for the uh, options writers and decreasing the cost for the options takers. And I've seen many of this kind of thing. Curve, YPool is doing the same. The collateral goes to the deposit goes to Aave, and it's kind of like a interesting, because our goal is to have like very developer friendly protocol and help others to build basically what their vision and communities to benefit from that. And those projects that have been building, they're actually the real success of Aave. So everyone who has been building, they actually have brought our success. So we share the success with these projects. I think that's the biggest catalyst.
Yeah. I totally agree that allowing your the folks that are building on Aave and empower them with the right tools would, I think, not only help the user growth, but also will kind of fortify Aave's position in the lending market, which I think is awesome. Um, so, like digging deeper here, catalytic moments helped Aave grow. You obviously went through the bear market, which wasn't an easy thing to do. And so, like, I guess as a founder, as a leader, that as you're leading your team through these kind of rough patches, how do you think about like the types of mental models that you need to keep to kind of keep your employees motivated and making sure that the company keeps chugging on? What were some of the things that you had to do to kind of go through those types of hurdles?
Oh, that's a very important topic. I mean, like in terms of like motivating, you question yourself quite often. Like I don't
Yeah,
see myself as a much of a leader. I mean, like
yeah,
I know kind of like I'm a big part of what Aave is doing right now, but in some extent, kind of like we just build stuff that we like to build,
yeah.
and it's like one thing I love about Aave is that it's more of a team
Hmm.
than actually like one or two public figures. Like we are like that sense the dynamics work really well. But one of the things is that when you go to things like bear market, or you're building something that will be in demand tomorrow, you
Hmm.
always question yourself, like, is this actually what I'm doing?
Yeah,
Is this something that I should be doing now when others are doing something else? Like or basically the adoption that you get is way smaller than you expected.
yeah.
And this is interesting because during Eatland era and like we saw kind of like we were very early in we were just building the usability and making things more seamless and better user experience. And it's always kind of like a moment where we knew that this thing exists already in traditional finance, so people can basically deposit to the money markets to draw credit, and still we were kind of like, you always doubt yourself, like, am I doing the right thing on
Yeah.
focusing on this? And then you're reading news on this on the side that, let's say, Coinbase is providing this and that amount of revenue, and then let's say some centralized lenders are doing this very well, and you basically started building from decentralized technology. And funny thing is that when I started and I was thinking about this idea, like I had an option to do it centralized way, and
Hmm.
I had an option to do it decentralized way. But I saw like the value added in decentralized technology. I saw like this is the thing that changes the finance, like, and it has been like long time when DeFi has been under the shadow of CeFi. Like people use CeFi because they're bigger brands. It's easier to enter there, and the ecosystem exists there. But in terms of DeFi, the ecosystem just recently grew into the extent, and the liquidity grew into the extent that actually it might be so that the centralized market participants might become obsolete because of the value proposition that DeFi brings. And I think that's really nice to see, because we were building for so long time without actual traction. And we hear it quite constantly now when people come to us and they say, oh, I remember like you started a few years ago, didn't pay much attention, but now that DeFi is big, like we're interested in. So this will happen to you. Like this will definitely happen to you. Like you're building something that you believe in, you know that there is value proposition, maybe not today, but tomorrow, and you're building it like in a lean way. And then like you will see your kind of like success when the moment comes. So this is something that everyone should like consider, like if you believe what you're doing, like just focus as much as you can, and don't let anything to distract you. Like the innovation part, like if you get new ideas for the innovation, that's amazing, but like don't let anything to distract what you're doing.
What now, looking back after the past 3 years, did you have any regrets on any of the choices that you should have made?
I was actually like some things has always been difficult for me to understand. Yeah. That like building smart contract based technology is slow, deploying and like all this kind of stuff, especially when you're holding a lot of funds, the building becomes even more slower. And that is something that is always like for me difficult to understand, in a way that kind of like when innovation goes super fast, but it's like you're building hardware, you know, that like kind of like you ship products and you know that you have in your labs already the next model that you actually need to be shipping, but you know, and the logistics there and the migrations and everything, you know, and upgrading smart contracts, that's basically the logistic parts there. So that is also like, that is what's always like difficult for me, and kind of like thinking like how we could do differently. But regretting in terms of going to decentralized technologies and starting this thing, I don't regret. Anyone who is starting, they definitely should understand that that this might take like all the time you might have in terms of like your professional time, and if you're enthusiastic enough, maybe your spare time as well. And many don't realize, because I see a lot of younger kind of developers that are launching products now, and I'm usually questioning that one thing that you guys need to understand is that once you do this fair launch, or whatever you want to call it, you will be kind of like tied to this project in the sense that you cannot go back easily, because you can't do the way that you give it straight to the community without being involved and leaving, because you're part of what you're building now. And many don't understand that it's a big decision, you know, and something that people need to think about. But I did have a lot of regrets, honestly. I did have some, especially in the beginning, when I saw like that we came first as with the decentralized technology, and someone came with the exact same kind of like a business model, or with centralized technologies, and then we saw them grow substantially and in front of our eyes, and kind of like we were thinking like the issue that why we are not growing, because people aren't able to use DeFi now. It's still limited at the moment, and but we still kept building. I mean, we still going continue to go forward, and I'm happy that we did, because otherwise we will not be in this position. And now DeFi is getting to more like getting a bit of mainstream attention, not saying adoption, but attention. And the fact that traditional finance is looking at what we're doing is very complementary for us, because this tells definitely that what we created here is something that is very valuable.
So there's been a few terms that have been kind of been spin around on Twitter. One is DeFi is going to eat CeFi. The other is, you know, our goal for decentralized finance is eventually to integrate with what's happening with CeFi. And you mentioned something about being complementary. So what is the world that you see, and how should founders think about that as they're building their product?
Yeah, I think what's important not to be too puristic in the sense that when we started back in days,
Yeah,
like our idea was kind of like you build things and you build everything has to be immutable, nothing
yeah,
can be upgradable, and this was kind of like the Ether Delta era,
yeah,
and like now I see DeFi becoming more optimistic. Like
yeah.
if you would launch back then USDC or even that early USDT on Ethereum,
Mhm.
uh, people will not like it that much. Like the community will not like embrace it. But now it's kind of like they see that like it's not that straightforward. You have to be optimistic on what you're building and using these technologies, and you have to have different levels of security because blockchain is about security.
Yeah,
And at the end of the day, if you want more, you will use products and services that have more. If you're okay to take more custody risk and use USDC or USDT, that's perfectly fine. They are kind of like complementary in the ecosystem and bring liquidity. And I think this is very important that we're trying to kind of like understand like how much we need security in what different levels.
yeah,
And this optimistic thinking is now taking a bit off, like with the optimistic rollups
yep.
and you must the priceless oracle that you don't expect that everyone is constantly trying to attack you, or like you basically you build things optimistically. And governance itself, like if you can govern protocols and the governance can change the code, that's already very optimistic compared to the puristic way of just deploying smart contracts and you can't change them. And yeah, I think one of the things we did recently is the credit delegation. So if you
Yeah.
deposit into Aave, let's say let's say just ETH, and you're earning interest. So if you're not borrowing, you can delegate the credit line to someone else. And this could mean that you could delegate it to a traditional, let's say, institution like a money lender. They can draw credit in stablecoins from Aave, convert them to USD, and then lend them to their borrowers. So kind of like what we're trying to do is we're trying to see like a DeFi as a ocean of permissions, liquidity, and interactions, and then everything can be built on top, either permissionlessly or basically with centralized services. And I think it's a thing that like we should always be open-minded, like how we could utilize DeFi in different ways. And this is how we are trying to kind of like connect and unlock liquidity from DeFi.
Got it. That's helpful to understand because there's many ways I think founders can lead in DeFi. And what I mean by that is you could be very collaborative, you could be very competitive, or you could be nonchalant and just build what you want to build. What I've realized from you and Aave is that you've embraced almost everything. And that's, you don't see that quite often. And one of the things that I wanted to touch on is what I guess why that type of thinking versus others that are either quite competitive or they kind of focus on what they're building. I've noticed that with almost everything that you've done, with every launch, with every chain, what have you. It's been you've always embraced it, and so I'm curious on what is driving that thinking, and has that helped you?
I guess it's also like about like human composability. I think like we tend to see like the composability in space
Yeah.
with the building things on top. But we see like this space is so small. Like we don't want to take too much like positions and think about like that we're competing too much. Like we want to compete. Like we definitely want to. We love to compete. Like we for us it's a some one way a kind of like a game. Let's say like but in a sports way that we we want to try to kind of like compete on innovation, on adoption and everything, because that keeps us very busy. Like when we see others building new things, really cool things, like that inspires us to build more innovation, and otherwise it will become very boring. I mean, if we won't do that. And I think in terms of like human compatibility, I think DeFi is very interesting in the sense that this is a space where everything is relying upon each other, and we carry the systemic risk. So one of the things I do quite often is that I help different kinds of projects and help them in terms of security. I help them in terms of like how they should launch things, and I try to kind of like make sure that they're doing in the beginning right decisions, and they have resources available, and that has been very very good work that I have done, because it really puts the newcomers to think about like what's important. And when I can share from my experience, it helps a lot. And regardless whether they're building on top of Aave or not, we still bear the same risk, because if there's one project that fails in terms of security, we're in quite like bad position. It takes a lot of time to build this whole reputation and the adoption, and it takes just one bug or hack to basically lose everything. And this is something that every project carries, regardless who they are. In that sense, like we have to be very friendly and keep like connections open and help each other. But at the same time, we also compete like in terms of liquidity, and that's totally fine. I mean, like it's really okay, and it's especially like for I mean. Yeah, I mean it's human compatibility, I would say.
No, yeah, no, it's a good to understand your thinking, because as founders are building a space, I think they get overwhelmed with all of what's happening in the space, and having the right thinking or the right lens will allow them to use that as an opportunity to find additional ways to kind of grow. Is kind of how I think about it. Let's
Yep.
let's shift gears a bit, and I'd like to learn more about how you find talent and manage your time between what you want to focus on and then what the team does. So maybe the first question is, how do you find talent?
Yeah, that's a difficult one, because
Yeah.
finding talent is very difficult in this space. And I'm always questioning like why, because like the things that you can build,
Yeah.
it's just like it's too fascinating. I understand like not everyone is interested in finance, but in general, like building like immutable technology, smart contract based, it's very fascinating, especially when you have crypto economics
Yeah.
there as well. And I've been like I come originally from Finland, and Finland usually has a lot of developers. There's been big companies. Nokia used to be very big, and like kind of like had a lot of like developer culture. Linux is from Finland originally, and so forth, and databases like MySQL. So like we had like very big developer culture, and but somehow when I try to attract them into DeFi or into Ethereum and build blockchain, it's something that they don't get interested that quickly. And I think it's just like potential that is not like yet seen completely by many developers. But the cool part is that things are way better than it used to be. Now we have more projects, more developers. There's hackathons, and a lot of people come to Aave and after a hackathon or even like during, and thinking, okay, like I want to basically build in Aave as well. Like, do you have any opportunities? And usually we get quite good amount of applications and amazing people from those hackathons. And I love hackathons in the way because I get to know the people. I'm personally involved quite a lot in what's happening if you participate in one of these, and I usually build relationships already there, and we kind of like in some projects I help them in terms of like brainstorming the product wise and the financial side as well, and it's so easy then to kind of like get interesting people into the team. And I think yeah, that's kind of one thing. And of course, like our challenge is mostly now to hire like the more experienced folks. So we're building very like mission critical stuff like everyone else, but it's a base layer that we're doing, and like many of the things require quite experienced background, and these backgrounds aren't that much available in the space. So for us, like our challenge is now that we have available, like we have applicants that might not have the same experience, where we need more experienced kind of like a profiles. And what we're doing is that we are also hiring less experienced and kind of like on the community level, and letting them build skill set, and then just basically build more experienced folks in the space. So that is like our challenge, and of course like it's more about how you motivate, and I think in this space it really depends on what you're building. So most of the talent is interested on the actual project, not the economics, maybe, like, because I mean the economics work in this space quite nicely, in the sense that there's VCs who are funding projects, there's the token issuance, so that is not a big issue. I mean the challenging is kind of like the order matching of a project that is interesting for a developer or soft skill personnel, and I think that's the kind of like challenge at the moment. So there's so many interesting things going on, and finding like the right person on the right project takes a bit of time.
Got it. So when ETHLend started all the way till now, you've grown from how many employees? And the second question is, how did you let go of your responsibilities? And was that hard for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were first like few persons in the team.
Yeah.
For a while, there were a lot of people helping us in terms of the community side. I think there was like 10 community members. Today, I think we're 23 in total head count. So we have very good like TVL per employee compared where Maker, for example, has 100 employees at the moment. So we're very small and robust, but most of their employees are developers. So different levels. So that's like our kind of like important part, that we have enough skilled developers in the team. And yeah, the responsibility is quite difficult, because in the beginning you want to keep things small, and I think one thing that every founder should do and is that they should calculate a lot. Like the more you calculate stuff, the more easier it is. For example, how much you basically need burn rate, how much your burn rate will increase. Let's say if you add a bit more into the tech side, how much it takes time to build things. Like many don't understand, but let's say if you build a smart contract or a product, there's things that involve the human resources, the smart contracts, audits of the smart contracts, formal verification potentially. So kind of all that piece. So if you want to do some sort of a project, there's a lot of things involved. So calculating things is very important. Like if you're hiring people, how much your burn rate will increase, and is it sustainable, and to what extent, and that is like a good thing to do. The more you calculate, the easier it is. And then the second important thing in terms of responsibility, you can always kind of like delegate the work quite a lot, but end of the day, you're the one who is responsible of everything. So I review the smart contracts as well that we have, because for many reasons, I need to understand what's going on, but also kind of like, not just that, but also kind of like, from my perspective, I can give some value added for the development team. But also like many things are related to backend stuff. So there might be that you might have to have someone taking care of finances, someone on the legal side, and you just need to have those people. And if you're raising funds, take into consideration as if you would have those people in your organization, and also like raise a bit more than you expect to need, because there might be some stuff that comes up and you didn't expect. So it's easier to raise them previously, and also you can be more clear for your investors that you actually need this amount of funds, because this will be the burn rate and so forth. I noticed that for investors that are already in the space and taking token positions, they care less about burn rates and so forth. They care more about the product and the
Yep.
the token allocations and that kind of stuff. So it's a bit weird. But when you're dealing with venture capitalists, they want to understand the burn rate. They really want to understand the economics and how the funds will be spent. So there's two kind of different things, and the token position investors, they kind of assume that if the token is launched, like let's say will be traded at 100 million, so everything will be solved. I don't know if it's sustainable, but to think that way, that's why you can't rely on anyone else than yourself in those things.
How did you bootstrap as you started ETHLend? Was it through VCs and then eventual token launch? Like, what was that process look like?
Well, I think it's the time period was very interesting because there wasn't that many like VCs, even probably not at all interested in actual in the DeFi ecosystem. I think there were VCs investing here and there, but nothing like formal.
Yeah.
And we first launched product, so we bootstrap ourselves. So basically, I was involved in the product. My basically friend who already did smart contracts helped me out there, and basically I paid him as well for the work, and we were able to deploy our first product before our actual like a token distribution. So what happened is that we already had a product out, and we had some users, and we had a community already, and basically for me, it was very difficult to raise any kind of capital. We're developing something that is very innovative, novel in the form that we did. Like if you go then and you will tell that, hey, like what we're building, the future's finance is going to be here. Like now there's like, we have maybe like, well, back in those times, maybe we had like $500,000 worth of value locked in the first months or like 6 months. And that was like very early days. And the potential is completely different than now, where you say that there's 1.5 billion worth of value locked. So it's kind of like you're building on a network that didn't have much like traction and scalability issues, and you're building something that doesn't have much like ecosystem. So I would say like it would have been impossible to raise from VCs. And given the fact that I was living in Finland, which is one of the last places you go and search for projects, unless you're like in a place that is already really crowded and you're trying to find new things, and unless you're funding gaming projects, which is very popular there. But so what we decided to do is a token distribution, and we did it. And one of the things like after what happened after 2017 is that somehow tokens became bad thing, like let's say, and for a reason actually, because there was so many scams involved. Like you just needed to have white paper, launch some bullshit and raise some funds, and that wasn't cool at all. But one of the things that happened during that era, there were so many good projects that were formed, like for example, the Aave, synthetics, and so forth. So there were actually good examples where, and MakerDAO is also from those era, even their sale was a bit more private. And what fascinates me quite a lot is that now we are entering back to this era where tokens are a good instrument to governing protocols and so forth, which is pretty cool. But for me, this token distribution was one of the coolest things actually that happened to me, because it was a very democratic way for me, being a student still in Finland, one of the smallest countries in world, well, kind of, and capital constrained place, like, and building technology that's very novel. And I was able to raise with our team 16 million worth of funds to build this. And this kind of like a trust will have been very difficult to achieve otherwise. And the fundraising was very democratic because it didn't matter if you're VC or not. You could actually participate in the sale, given that you're not in the from areas that we didn't include. So in that sense, like it was very democratic way of actually getting capital. And I see that now that we're looking at the fair launch models. So this liquidity mining where people are just bringing liquidity and printing the token, and then basically they get the governance power. It's in one way a bit unfair model if you think about it, because it's the kind of like, if you look at all the accounts who are farming, it's the whales who are getting the biggest amounts, and it's practically free money. So they are the printers, and people with smaller accounts, so people who are holding 100 USDC or 1,000 USDC, like smaller amounts, for them it doesn't make sense to farm at all. I mean, they're farming, let's say $1 a day or worth, or $10 a day worth, or something like that. So for them to get exposure, it's better to go and buy. So what we see happening is that the whales are actually printing the funds and selling it to the smaller people. So whales are getting completely free money, and they probably have exposure as well.
Yeah.
And the little people are actually paying for it, which is not that cool. It's kind of like actually unfair launch model. And I think one of the things that we've seen Vitalik embrace quite a lot is the DICOs. So basically you give the governance right away, but you have everyone to get skin in the game. So everyone pays for the tokens, and they get instant governance, and they control the tap for the team, and basically vote on payments and so forth. And that's a model that's out there for grabs, and no one's taking it. It's just like weird. Like I know there's one project called Aave, which is doing like NFTs on top of Aave, and kind of using DeFi to embrace people to save and so forth. They are doing the DICO, but it's weird that we have like actual working model and no one is using it, instead of like we're using this money printing mechanism.
Yeah, so many hot topics there. Okay, we are seeing a world where liquidity farming is becoming a really big thing. There's so many different projects that are announcing left and right. And it seems like liquidity in and itself isn't the moat. It's just these larger whales that are, looking for the next token where they can accumulate and dump. How is that for the ecosystem overall? Because I think I would say almost every day I hear about 2 or 3 projects launching where $500 million that's ready on the sidelines is ready to be deployed in any one of these projects. Is that sustainable? And if it isn't, how do we introduce a DICO model in such a way where entrepreneurs are open to using this? Because I do think you had tweeted about this a couple of days ago, and I thought a lot about it, and I've asked founders why they aren't using it, and I think the biggest response I've gotten back, or the most common response I've gotten back, is like, it's just a lot of work. It just adds more friction points into getting the capital that I need, or getting the users that I need to kind of grow my ecosystem. So I'm curious on what, I guess if I had to break down what I've just mentioned, 2 questions. One is it sustainable, and is it bad for DeFi? And then 2 is the DICO model, like how do we motivate some of the founders to use that to fundraise? Yeah,
I would say in terms of like sustainability, definitely like when we are, I would say like bringing your liquidity and printing tokens is basically printing value. So someone is buying that value and others are holding it, and that makes the market capitalization of that. So very similar stuff has happened in forks. So let's say when Bitcoin has been forked multiple times on something, first there is value, and then it goes, in most cases, close to zero. There might be some of the forks that still has some value because many of the larger participants are basically holding that value, and that how is the market capitalization formed. But I would say like there's many interesting components. Like you can do this to a certain extent. I mean the banks are printing notes as well, and here it actually is, we have the same, but in kind of like crazy way. And I think if the project that they're building, if they have a product or they're forking a product that is somewhat successful, but they're actually building some new value into with this community. So you would fork something that where the current governance system doesn't work, or it's basically somehow working against the community, then it makes sense to fork if you want to have different kinds of agenda and policy and create the community around that. And more importantly, like also innovation, like you innovate with the product. So definitely it works, but the way we see now, it's just like copy pasting stuff all over and over again. And that will just lead to a situation where those tokens will go to zero. I mean, if they don't have actual real community, innovation, developers, it's just it's not sustainable. And if it's bad for DeFi, I think if it doesn't involve innovation, it's kind of like a bit useless because you're fractionalizing liquidity.
Yeah.
But if it does actually bring some innovation or some kind of like a cultural community difference from other projects, then it might be worth it. But end of the day, like the governance needs to, it's not also like the important stuff, because the users are the important, like who are using the products. And then like you could think of governance a bit of like governing a company. Like it's not the actual governance of that company that people care about. Like that's not important. It's important that there is governance and stuff is like controlled, like, and how things could be updated in smart contract level. But the actual like important stuff is the actual users of the protocol. So people who are, let's say if it's Tesla, like the people who are driving Tesla, who are buying Tesla and driving, their experience is the most important one, and how you can bring that kind of importance to them. So some of them will go, most of them, because people are copy pasting, will go to zero. But I would say some of the project will become quite interesting in that sense.
Got it. Yeah, you mentioned something very interesting, which is building product, right? And the thing is, like, when you see so many copy and pastes, people are just transferring liquidity from one pool to another, essentially. And what I always think about is like, how are they retaining those users, right? It's kind of like, I don't know if you followed like Groupon here in the States, but it's essentially a coupon-based company. Yeah. And essentially what they did was offer discounts to certain stores, and they come in, they get the product, and then they never come back.
Yeah. Actually, it's so funny that you brought this up, because the model came to Europe and all the way to Finland, and it's exactly the same kind of like people go there and it's like an airdrop, you know. Remember the airdrop? So they go and they take the discounts and they leave, and the entrepreneurs will be thinking of well, yeah, kind of I gave the discount, they bought it and they left, and no one stayed. And that's kind of like it's exactly the same, I would say.
Yeah, agreed. And so I guess, yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, one thing about the DICOs I forget to say about this, that I definitely think like I think founders are scared. They are scared that, hey, I want to do this token distribution model, but I'm scared that what if the community one day says to me that, hey man, or like that you can actually, like, we don't need you anymore for some particular reason.
Yeah.
So teams and founders are scared, and this scariness, being scared, like, is the bottleneck in DICOs. Because one interesting thing what Andre did with his model when he basically did the zero minting, the fair launch, is he actually didn't give much about the token. He just wanted to put it out and see how it goes as an experiment, and there was a real fair launch. But what happened is that the community actually wanted him to build more, because there's always social capital involved. And if you think about Wi-Fi is a personal token, because it's based on Andre's value, what he's building. And now it's getting more, becoming less social token as the governance evolves. There's more people involved and building, and in that sense. But I think it's, people are just scared because technically DICO is very easy to do, and not just easy, but it gives the straight governance. So you skip a lot of things in between. Like, why would you do the progressive decentralization when you can do it like direct
Yeah.
decentralization? And you know, Aave, one of the things we learned Aave is that we hate the progressive decentralization because we are doing it, and it's there's like steps to do it, and kind of like the idea there is that you retain the control for your investors and the VC investors, and create a model for them. But if you're doing DICO, actually, like, your investors have instant control on what you're doing. You can spare some of the funds for ecosystem rewards, and then you have a tab, the investors and the team and everyone votes like how much you can spend. And the way I see it, I think like we shouldn't be scared of it, because it's very direct model. You save a lot of work there. You get instant decentralization, and I think like you probably get more people involved in building things. So actually people will help you, and you will build also like over time market capitalization. So I think people are just scared in a way that they want, like founders want to have control in the beginning. At least I felt that way. This is an honest opinion. Like, I wanted to have a control in the beginning, so that what we launch is exactly what we try to achieve, and like no one distracts us. And I felt this way in the beginning, but over time I saw like actually the more you give to the community, the more powerful your community is, and your tokenomics and your governance model.
And you have strong milestones, right? I mean, you're able to achieve it. So it helps you structure your goals and future rounds as well. So I think it actually is a very good structure. We haven't seen it like really live and out in the public yet. There's a couple that I've seen that tried it, but ultimately I don't think it's gotten traction. But I do think this would be probably the right route. We have about 9 minutes left, so I want to go down to and work or talk through your product, all the products that you've announced. And I guess there's a few questions that I have around that. One is obviously go through all the products that you have. I mean, like tokenizing mortgages yesterday, Aave 2.0 a couple weeks ago, under collateralized loans. How do you manage your time? Like, how do you, where does the innovation come from? Where's the innovation engine come from? And how do you manage your product roadmap? Because, you know, for a lot of founders, they want to be where you are. But they're all, what's happening with all the founders that we talk to is like, they just want to build one product, like they want to get out there and have a beachhead of a product. And then they want to eventually add more products. But when they see what you're doing, it's very motivational. And so like, I guess, how do you manage your R&D? How do you manage innovation? And how do you see the future? And why do you think it's right?
Yeah, I mean, we try to build innovation as much as and faster as we can. Like, if this is value added, we try to ship it out and like have the capture the momentum and so forth. The challenge for us is that now the kind of like assets under management is very big. I mean, there's 1.5 billion in the smart contracts. So we have to be slow in terms of how we innovate. But what we can do, we can build on top of different kinds of things, or structure innovation in a way that we actually don't compromise security. And one of the things that we're doing, for example, we are using, when we create new markets, we're using the very same smart contract infrastructure. We only basically change the price feed provider smart contract, which we tailor, for example, depending on what kind of price feeds there are. And then I would say that, yeah, so we could deploy, for example, the realty market. We could deploy Uniswap version 2 market, basically balancer liquidity provider shares as a collateral market, and we could scale this way, and then building more things on top. So the security is actually more about architecture and also like best practices. But yeah, I think without innovation, like we will get bored pretty quickly. So this is why we're doing it.
And maybe it would be good to just talk about some of the products that you're launching for the founders that are on here. Did you hear me? Sorry.
Oh,
Oh, sorry. Let me ask you this question again. What are some of the products you're building? I know you talked
yeah,
about the recent announcement is tokenizing mortgages,
yeah.
and then Aave 2.0 under collateralized loans. I guess yeah. Talk a little bit about the product, but then talk about the world that you see that we don't.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's cool. Yeah, I mean, Aave version 2 is something we're working very hard because there's stuff that we can do. We will have, like, most of the products are actually features,
Yeah.
but when we build things on smart contracts, like one small economical feature becomes a product, and that is very fascinating thesis. So one of the things we will have is basically collateral swap. So you can swap your collateral position. So let's say you have ETH as a collateral, and next thing you can swap that you have a mortgage as a collateral, because we basically have tokenized mortgages as collateral, for example. Then you can do debt swap. You can swap from one debt position to another. You borrowed in DAI, you're paying 7%, and USDC borrow might be at 4%. You can just click a button and swap
Mm-hmm.
the DAI debt to USDC debt without returning the loan. So
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty cool. And some of the stuff like we will have is I mean, like, we'll have margin trading as well, so you can trade on margin positions, and I mean, lot of things. And I kind of like, sometimes I think we're building things like very diversely, but most of the stuff that we're building is like experimentation. For example, we have credit delegation was experimentation, and in version 2 we have it more natively added, and it brings like a lot of interesting stuff that others can be built. So the most of innovation that Aave will have will actually happen by other people who are building, other teams, projects that are building on top and using these features somehow. And I'm expecting more innovation from that particular side.
Cool. So we have a question from the audience. How do you see Aave evolving in comparison to other base layer lending protocols like Compound and Maker?
That's a good question, because I think what where how we different quite a lot is basically how our protocol is built. So we have
Yep.
different kinds of assets, for example, but also different kind of risk framework that we're applying.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's more about the thesis. So like the whole ecosystem has been about locking value in smart contracts, and we're more about unlocking value in smart contracts. That's why we have flash loans in the protocol natively. We have the A tokens, which are algorithmic interest-bearing tokens, which is different from Compound, for example, because our tokens, they increase in balance algorithmically. And for example, credit delegation is also a way to unlock some liquidity out of Aave. So we are all about capital efficient usage of the protocol.
Got it. And of the raise that you've done for Aave, what was the breakdown like for investors, and how much of the ownership did you and team maintain?
Yeah, I think the team maintained, was it like 23% back in days? So it was quite low. Actually, it's fascinating now that I'm thinking, because we had like very democratic sale. I've seen projects where the team maybe has 60%, which is super unfair. And I think that 23% includes everything, kind of like that. Rest is that went to the market. So I think like we've been from the get-go quite I mean, like fair in that sense.
And the final question here is, if we're building on top of Aave, what's the best way to connect? Example given, building an investment product on top of credit delegation, similar to
Right.
DeFi and synthetics?
Yeah, I mean, you can contact me in Telegram. So I will put my handle, and I will connect to someone from our tech team and help out in brainstorming. And I usually involve myself quite a lot in product development. And it's really fascinating because we have a lot of developers in the space, but like getting help on brainstorming the financial modeling and also like the economics is very, very beneficial. I love to do that quite a lot.
Well, we had one more question. In the move towards DeFi, towards property, do you have an outlook on other tangible consumer markets? Example, giving gaming. What are some of the possibilities that you see?
Totally, like gaming is super, super interesting. Like I spend a lot of time actually researching on things. Been spending like many nights actually just looking kind of like what kind of things you could put into the on-chain economy. I think e-commerce is going to be big, and I think gaming is going to be big. And the stuff we see now in DeFi, it reminds me a bit gaming. Like we have this kind of like a fair launch and people running there and so forth. It's very fun, like a bit of gambling style, but I'm betting big on gaming. And one of the fascinating things I recently saw is that you could actually deploy Unity games into IPFS and let other people to access it. So
Yeah.
thinking if you actually combine that with crypto economics, you could have like very cool stuff. And their forks could be pretty awesome, like where you could actually fork stuff and create new things. And yeah, gaming, I'm very bullish, totally.
And any podcasts, books, or blogs you read to inspire ideas?
Recently, I think what inspires me most is kind of like just listening to people, what they're doing, and not just kind of like, uh, honestly, I find a lot of inspiration outside DeFi, talking to people about the DeFi space and what's happening here. And people raise a lot of questions and compare what we're doing here to other things. And there is where I get like most of the inspiration. I read a lot. I do listen to podcasts. I especially listen to what others are doing. Like I'm very like into knowing what others think in the space and trying to follow, like reading their opinions. So yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that you could actually get into.
Awesome. Well, Stani, once again, thank you so much for, hopping on and discussing kind of how you see the space and how you've gotten to where you have. We look forward to seeing all the new products that are being announced. We're excited about what you're building, and I'm sure a lot of the founders that are on this call are going to take back what they learned and use it for their growth. So appreciate that.
Awesome. It was a pleasure to be here and share my thoughts.
Thank you, Stani. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.